The Truth and the Circle Around It by Kage Scott. Chapter 11. The Ride Gets Bumpy. 10:04, May 30, 1992, Seattle, Washington, USA. This is the kind of meeting that only happens when the shit has or is about to hit the fan. It's about to. RCMP Superintendent Lyle Ferguson, Vancouver Police Detective Art Stevens, Seattle Police Detective Brian Rondell, F.K. Clark, and Joe Myers from the FBI all gathered to have a conference call with state troopers and FBI agents in Florida, Oregon, and Michigan. The reason? Gentlemen, I hope you're all sitting down. FK's voice boomed across the airwaves. Those in the room with him could see his grim, angry look, while those on the other ends of the phone heard the crackle of the wires burning from his demeanor. I know you fellows in Florida and Michigan are dealing with what has already happened, and I'm hoping somewhere in all of that is a sense of what is in the future for the rest of us. This is Sergeant Mike Wills of the Dade County Special Crimes Unit of the Florida State Patrol. He has a quiet about him. His voice puts you at ease as soon as he begins to speak. That shouldn't fool you. In over 20 years of service, he has seen as much as anyone, and having such information passed along by such an angelic voice with the addition of a southern accent is enough to send shivers down the spine of even the most hardened officers anywhere. I've interviewed 2 informants in the past week that tell me the same story. Biggest deal about this is that one told me the story before it happened. In Seattle, and most likely everywhere else, all eyes grew by a wide margin. They looked around to catch the same expression on the other faces in the room. Jaws were dropping at the realization of the following sentences. You see, this fellow who does as much business with us as he does with the Cubans came to me expecting a big payday. Troopers Will's voice as piercing as it was smooth. He told me his hotshot killer would be in town to clean up a couple of problems. When I asked him which problems those would be, he said, you and me. And then I asked him whose problem we were. He looked at me like I was a fish about to be gator food. A silent pause was unbroken until the other person at the Florida end of the phone began to speak. This was the voice of Special Agent Carl Matthews. He had only been on the job for 3 years, but in Miami, that can be a lifetime of experience. A Yale Law graduate who gave up the chance at going into practice for the more exciting hands on offer from the Bureau. He had been a Marine for 6 years before law school, so he wasn't as young as most would imagine him to be. That's when Sergeant Wills called our office, Matthews said. Once we heard the name of Antonio Alvarez, we knew it was time to do a joint investigation. Yep, Wills began, with his laid-back, drawling demeanor. I'd known this here Alvarez was a bad seed, but I didn't know the whole story. In fact, now I wish I still didn't. Well, gentlemen, Clark broke in, I'm sure we all can read the rest of the details of what went on after that, but we'd like to know what you've been able to find out since. Can you follow a dream sequence? If so, You can imagine yourself drifting off into the memory of the two men as Wills and Matthews describe the events of the past 2 days since Alvarez and his men left Florida. 0737 May 25, 1992, Jupiter, Florida, USA. As the state troopers fly down the side streets in their cruisers, the convoy of the FBI SWAT team follow the state police SWAT team. This, as you can imagine, is an unsettling sight for the quiet town of Jupiter, Florida. Why all the why all the firepower, you ask? Well, this is Unit 441 heading south along West Riverside Drive with Units 345 and 736. We are blocking off the intersections at Seabrook Road and Kingsley Road. Roger 441, Wills acknowledged. Get the houses and yards along the streets evacuated ASAP. It's all going fast, so fast in fact that the other units called in from around the area are just arriving now. The local sheriff and his deputies are covering the evacuation of homes near where a shootout with police is surely going to take place any minute. Alvarez and his boys had left in a float plane only an hour before, but they had left in a hurry because of the pressure from the new information the police had obtained. So quickly that the comrades who were helping them were caught off guard as well. And now in the early morning hours, the sleepy little town was about to be awoken by the invasion of big city crime and big city crime fighting. As the reports came in one after another, it was aware to the members of the SWAT teams that all the possible escape routes were blocked and houses in the line of firing were being evacuated as quickly and quietly as possible. But now the suspects were aware of the oncoming threat and were themselves preparing. Inside the house on Lance Road, Buddy, the leader of the gang, was organizing his three sidekicks and getting ready for the next move by police. Outside the large multi-level house in front, police cars had rolled up and the officers were taking up positions behind them for protection. These were your usual patrol officers, armed only with pistols and shotguns. In the back alley, the same flurry of activity by the same poorly prepared type of police who were still ready to fight as hard as they could with what they had. There was no time for a sneak attack. The officers knew the house was as guarded as any drug fortress. A waist-high chicken wire fence surrounded the house on all sides. There were no trees to hide behind during an advance. In the rear right corner of the yard was a small shed made of materials that were as thin as paper, so no good for protection either. Then from the inside of the house, the crudely made iron shutters were being closed. Each had small openings from which bullets could come out of much easier than go in. Across the street, police snipers were taking position on the peaks of two of the houses, while across the back alley, a third team was in a better position on the top of a 3-story apartment building. The officers behind the shield of police cars was quickly being replaced by the members of the SWAT teams, dressed in helmets and bulletproof bodysuits. Each team then began to inform their leaders as they were ready and in place. This is Trooper Team Leader Craig. We are in position. This is Bureau Team Leader Allen. We are ready to go when ordered. Are all insertion points manned and ready, Team Leader Allen? Matthews asked to double check. That is an affirmative, sir, Allen answered. Inside the house, the four men met in the stairway leading to the second floor. Weapons and ammunition was laid out at each window. They were so heavily armed that they could actually leave weapons lying around, so that when one ran out, another was ready to go. There was no way these men were going to give up. They would rather die fighting than chance even being questioned ever again. Of course, the cocaine might have had something to do with it. They had some in their bodies, but stashed in the house was enough for a very long visit to a prison. Sticks, you take a hunting rifle and see if you can tag one of those snipers in the front. Teddy, you do the same in the back. Buddy began to order. Smasher and I will spray the rest of the fuckers with machine guns to see how many of the fuckers we can splatter. A few seconds later, as several police officers were still running around to take up positions, the whole neighborhood echoed with the sound of automatic gunfire. Bullets sprayed into the bodies of cars and the sides of houses and anything else that was in the sight lines. Sticks and Teddy were the only ones taking the time to aim, but luckily for the intended targets, when the rifle barrels stuck out of the windows, the officers took cover. The quiet little harbor town is now a virtual circus of horrifying noise. Gunfire bellowing out across the crisp morning air, barking in every direction. Just like the bullets each sound is sending, the taps, thuds, and twangs of each round crashing into and off of everything in sight. And even far off in the distance, as some projectiles have completely fled the scene, having nothing in their way but a direction, until inevitably running into or up against a far off object. But thankfully, no innocent victims. Inside the house is worse. The crack of every bullet fired both within and from the outside can be heard louder and more intensely than from the outside. Each time a gun inside the house pounds off, its sound echoes 1,000 times off each wall within. Dozens of times a second, a police round is hitting the side of the brick house, slamming into one of the iron shutters, or coming through one of the small openings in the shutters to pound into a wall, a piece of furniture or decoration, or, as is happening, into one of the individuals that each is meant for, such as the one that hit Sticks in the left shoulder, or the one that grazed the right side of Smasher's face. "If anyone can get a shot off when they go to reload, do it," Alan ordered over the radio. "I want anyone who can to take aim at your assigned targets as soon as you can, and when the first opportunity comes up, take it. Do not hesitate for a better shot. Do what they are doing. Blast away." Everyone heard the order, including the 4 men in the house, who had a new scanner with the volume turned up so it could be heard anywhere in the house. A huge advantage because the police outside didn't hear everything that could be said inside the house. "There are 2 men down here in the front of the house beyond the cruisers," a voice came across the radio. "We need to find better protection, quick." It only took a second or so for Sticks to pull the rifle in and pick up an Uzi. But the instant he did, a flurry of bullets began to come through the small opening in the iron shutter, many others missing, creating clouds of sparks, splinters of wood and brick flying out from the house. Dust and smoke and sparks and splinters and pieces of broken or deflected rounds landing in a circle as large as the yard itself, as if a dusty old table in an attic had just been blown off after years of neglect. He quickly ran to the other window and opened its small turret, but when he did, it had the same result. In the other room, the same fate fell upon Buddy, and the same at the back of the house. There were so many police outside that every opening and every shutter had bullets coming through it and dancing around it. The walls inside the house were beginning to be so perforated that rounds were going right through from one side of the house to the other. Lines of fire from outside the house were being directed to shatter through the bricks so the holes could be found away from the iron shutters. Then an order was given that did not make its way to the radio, another pre-planned maneuver by the police. 3 men in front and 2 in back ran towards the house and crouched down, each carrying a small green pack. Then, after each pack was placed up against the basement window and besides the front door, the men retreated back to safety of the riddled cruisers. By this time, another 2 officers had approached from one of the neighboring yards to the side of the house, where a door leads to the basement. They have placed directional charges around the doorframe and on the door itself. Then they step back and are joined by 6 other officers. They are up against the wall, but away from the door and have large shields to hide behind. Then, almost simultaneously, the explosions go off. The green packs knock the basement shutters loose and partially open the front door of the house. The door with the directional charges breaks into 1,000 pieces, most of it, blasting down the stairway leading into the house. Then percussion grenades are tossed into the openings and go off. Then, cough, cough, cough. A long groan is heard in the basement. Then silence again. As smoke rolls slowly up and away from the house, a shutter in the upstairs opens to the back of the house, and a barrel appears out of it. Almost immediately, a shot rings out loudly from across the alley. And as the barrel flies back inside the house, a body can be heard as it falls to the floor inside the same room. A direct hit to the head finds Teddy dying, dead. Another team member runs towards the house carrying a tear gas launcher, but before he gets 2 strides away from the protection of the car, shots ring out, and he balls up and falls hard and rolling to the ground. But the bullets do not stop as a submachine gun rings out death to echo and be heard once again everywhere in town, with round after round after round pounding into the downed man. It only bellows alone for a second or so. Even though the outcome of the event is stunning, the reactions of over a dozen officers are the same. Literally hundreds of bullets are aimed at the opening from which the death has come, and as clouds of splinters and sparks erupt around the window, the Grim Reaper claims another, as so many of the projectiles find their intended target inside the house. Orders and questions ring out across the radio and across the now still and silent yard. There is no movement inside the house. The only sound is the slow crackling of small flames, which are beginning to build from the torn and battered remains of what was only moments ago a perfectly sound dwelling. Now the order is given, and officers advance inward, checking around corners, behind doors, and under tables and beds. The only words spoken are clear, 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 clear. Next, fire extinguishers ring out all through the house. There are 4 dead bodies to be found. Buddy is at the bottom of the stairs leading to the basement. He is riddled with burns and splinters. He is standing at the door to the side of the house when the charges went off and felt the full power of the blast. Teddy, as you know, is lying in one of the upstairs bedrooms. Styx is in the kitchen, so full of bullets there is almost nothing left from the chest up. In the front entrance of the house is Smasher, the knob of the front door lodged in his chest, and his legs are almost blown off. Your dream sequence is over, and now we return to the meeting of the legal minds. 1100 May 30, 1992, Seattle, Washington, USA. Well, gentlemen, Clark broke in, I'm sure we all can read what went on after that, but we'd like to know what you've been able to find out since. 4 of our men died that day, Matthew started with a tired, crackling voice. The pilot of the float plane hasn't been found yet. We think he'll turn up in a morgue sooner or later. The plane was found the next day abandoned in Carlisle Lake, Illinois. We're checking possible refueling points between there and Jupiter, Florida, because there's no way that plane could have gone that far without gassing up. Are you sure this pilot isn't part of the gang? The voice of Special Agent Rick Hines of the Portland office asked. Damn sure of it. His wife got knocked on the head, and some weekend boaters watched as he was forced to get in the plane. Sergeant Wills replied, No, this poor old guy. is a victim, and I don't think they'll leave a witness. We think they boarded a plane in St. Louis, Matthews continued. It's possible they chartered one there. It wouldn't be very easy to hijack at that airport because of their security systems. They're the best I've ever seen and probably the simplest. Alvarez has his own Learjet. He could have it waiting somewhere out of the way, Joe broke in. The state police in Missouri and the FBI field office there are working on it right now, Wills added. As soon as they get a better idea of the situation, they'll wire all of us. So if no one knows where they went after dumping the plane in Illinois, Superintendent Lyle Ferguson breaks in, what makes anyone think they'll show up in Portland next? Because last year was the first time in 8 years that Gary Brox has missed the Rose Festival, Myers said out loud. They need a place to hide, and those crowds are as are as good a place as any to hide right out in the open. It's Antonio Alvarez's show. Art Stevens begins his point. Why would they follow Brock's lead? Because then they're only a few miles from Seattle, which is where Alvarez will want to be next, Myers said confidently. He always goes to Seattle for the 4th of July. We found evidence that these 4 men in the house belonged to some kind of killing club. There were videotapes in the office in the basement. On each one was one of these men talking about becoming a member of the club, and then something very horrifying happened. They killed someone right there on the tape. At first, we thought back to a murder case in Daytona a few years back, where a guy had people believing he was some hotshot killer that worked for the CIA. Turns out he was just trying to find someone to kill his wife. We thought this might be some kind of copycat group, but with the connection to this here Alvarez character, we don't know what to think. Son of a bitch, Alvarez, FK blurted out. He's got to be stopped at any cost. One more very disturbing fact, gentlemen, the Florida officer said harshly. There were several maps found in the house, all North American road atlases. There were a lot of lines and circles drawn on the page from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. That's where the International Association of Chiefs of Police Convention will be held this year. A credit card owned by one of the men killed in the house had been used in several places in Winnipeg over the past year and had made a reservation for the same week as the conference for 5 rooms across the street from the main hotel being used by the association. Realization has broken in, and now a plan must be made, precautions put forth and orders followed. They won't want to confront Alvarez unless they can do it away from the crowds. He and his gang are getting desperate now, and they won't be afraid to cause a tragedy or a riot in order to escape being caught. 11/20 June 2, 1992, Portland, Oregon, USA. Portland is one of those areas that rarely gets blistering hot or blistering cold. But the past year had to prove that theory wrong, and now this week is going to do everything it can to do the same. Yesterday it was cool and windy, overcast and dark. Today, man oh man, I'm glad to hear this car has air conditioning. Joe says as he and F.K. Clark get into the Blue Crown Victoria. I thought it was going to be cool like yesterday, or I wouldn't have worn such a heavy jacket. Yeah, well, it's not done warming up yet, Joe. Agent Hines remarks as he looks over his left shoulder before pulling out into the quick, heavy downtown traffic. I'm going to take you for a tour down along Southwest Front Avenue. That's where the main attractions during the day will be. There will be Navy ships from several countries, mostly ours and the Canadians. There's going to be a huge midway as usual, but this year they're going to have daily circuses as well. They drove on for a while, chatting about some of the plans they had made and checking the manpower rosters they had written up. The plan was to only keep an eye on the Alvarez gang, if they caught a look at them at all. By the weekend, they expected them to make a move, and if they did, to have enough of their people in Rang to handle a takedown if it was only absolutely necessary. How many people can be reasonably expected daily? FK asked as the car traveled down the turnoff to exit the freeway and circle around downtown before pulling over and walking along the area by the river where they expected to have the biggest crowds. Well, it's a big deal, this Rose Festival, Hines remarked. The local police told me um, there would easily be over 100,000 people in the general area and into the downtown core each day this week. That's just the people taking in the festivities. There's usually that many people working in this area of downtown every weekday, not to mention all the people that would be down here shopping, paying bills, and such each of those weekdays, Joe said with a soft voice. You can imagine the look on his face, can't you? There is going to be a lot of people around all week, and if the Alvarez gang tries anything, there will be lots of opportunity for hostages or just for innocent people to get hurt. 10:44 June 5th, 1992, Portland, Oregon, USA. Day by day, the week goes by with no sign of anyone associated with Alvarez until Friday late in the morning. Two Portland City police officers are walking their beat along Southwest Ninth Avenue when they come upon two men who appear to be very drunk. Come on, you two, let's get the hell out of here, Brock says to his two younger companions. JC and Jimmy are brothers. They're also old friends of Brock's, even though they're a few years younger. They've been at one of those underground bars almost all night. They felt safe going there because during Rose Festival, the local police basically leave these places alone unless trouble comes up, and usually it doesn't. Brock and his two friends are the only ones of their group left. The others went home hours ago. It's been a quiet week for them, so Antonio decided they could all leave the confines of their little hideaway for an evening of town if they stayed in the background. Well, these two are locals, and they've been going out all week like usual. And since their buddy Gary Brock is in town again, it's time to party that much harder. Let's go, Jimmy. Gary will get us home, even though that hot waitress won't be coming with us. Okay, JC, let's go, Brock. Man, Jimmy says as he puts his left arm around Brock's neck and leans up against him as if he's joking that Brock should take his weight for him. I'm not packing you around, you little lard ball. Brock quips as they all laugh and start playing punch the shoulder indiscriminately with each other. Then they leave and start heading down the sidewalk. Jimmy and JC are so drunk they can't make a dozen strides without almost falling over, so Brock decides to go ahead and get the car from the parking garage and come back to pick them up. He tells them his plan, they agree, and he departs to go get the car, which is parked about 2 blocks away. He gets to the garage and finds he has to take the stairs because the elevator is out of order. So up the 4 flights he jogs and then makes his way down to the car. The parking garage is no different than the rest of the downtown area. Very busy. It takes him almost 3 minutes just to get out of his space. Then another 5 to get down to the next level. Then the next, and finally to the pay window at street level. He eventually gets out onto the busy street and then has to go down a couple blocks and around to catch up to his two friends who are walking down the sidewalk of a one-way street. Finally, as he turns south to go pick up his buddies, he sees them chatting with the two beat officers. So he pulls over on the other side of the street and looks around the car for a disguise. Aha, a ball cap and a pair of wraparound sunglasses. Uh-huh. You two look like you've got an early start to your Friday night, Patrolman Thomas says as they approach the two drunken men who are leaning up against a brick wall, wondering where their ride is. Oh, yeah, sir, Jimmy says as he sees the two policemen in front of him and gets serious, trying not to show how drunk he really is. Well, of course we are, buddy. JC is not reacting the same way. We have to make up for all the poor, hard-working people like you two who can't get this way. Man. He chuckles, and the two young, fun-loving officers can't help but chuckle along with him. Well, look, guys, Officer O'Brien starts. You don't look like you're going to be getting too far for a while. Maybe you should have maybe you should have a few coffees and take a bit of your edge off. Oh, hey, officer, that sounds like a damn good idea. But one of our buddies is sober, and he's gone to get the car to take us home, Jimmy adds. Yeah, but I think that fucker left us here, Jimmy. He's been gone for about an hour, JC says as he looks up and down the street, wobbling, barely able to stand on his own. Well, if he's been gone that long, Thomas says. No, sir, he hasn't been gone that long, sir, Jimmy remarks. Has fucking two, JC drawls. No, officer, it's busy today. It just seems that long. He'll be along any minute, Jimmy says. Goddamn better be, JC shouted as if he was hoping Brock could hear him. Sir, please try to keep your voice down, O'Brien says to JC as he puts a hand on his shoulder to show he's trying to help. Just then, Brock pulls up with the car and honks to get their attention. Then he waves them in. That's not him, JC says as he tries to focus his eyes, squinting like only a real drunk can. Yes, it is, JC. It's your car, for Christ's sake, Jimmy is. Are you sure your buddy is sober? Thomas asked Jimmy. Brock, old buddy, old pal. Are you okay to drive? JC yells out. Brock's face goes numb. His jaw drops as he looks through the sunglasses at his friends and the two patrolmen. But it's too late. Before they bend down to look in the car to get a good look at the driver, the two young but bright officers look at each other. Jimmy and JC go towards the door of the car to get in, quickly thinking. The two officers help them to the car, and O'Brien opens the door and bends down to move the front seat ahead before the two brothers try to get in. You sure you're okay to drive, sir? O'Brien asks the driver, looking closely at him, but with a friendly smile of someone just trying to help. Oh, yes, sir. I haven't had a drop, Brock quietly answers with the same kind of smile. Okay then, just drive carefully. It's really busy today, O'Brien says as he nods and moves away so the two men can get in the car. Then the two officers walk away and start heading down the street. They are walking in the direction of the traffic so that when the trio drives by, they can get another look and take down a license plate number. As Brock takes the car around the corner, the two officers stop. Call it in, Thomas. I'm writing it down, O'Brien orders. As Thomas does so, Alvarez listens to the scanner he has. It will be a while before the three men get back, and by the time they do, they'll certainly have cops and FBI following them. It's time to move. He knows by listening to the police conversation that this is the first time anyone has seen them since they've been in Portland. Brock doesn't have a scanner to listen to, but he's no fool. He realizes he's got to pull over and call Antonio right now, so he does. JC is already passed out in the back seat, So he tells Jimmy to stay put, knowing he's sensible enough to do what he's told, even in this condition. Then he gets out of the car and goes to the phone booth to call the house. 11:07 June 5th, 1992, Portland, Oregon, USA. Mr. Brock, this is good thinking. This is good thinking on your part, Alvarez says, after realizing who has called him and why. Take your two friends somewhere else and get on a city bus. Go on a wild goose chase for a couple of hours, making it look like you're a tourist. If you're being followed, don't get caught. Figure it out and call me. I'll have to leave here, but you can reach me on the car phone. Yes, Antonio. I'll drop them off at one of their friends' places, Brock replies. Then, after a very short conversation, he does what he is told. Now there are all kinds of surveillance equipment thrown into action. There are 3 frequency detection trucks in motion throughout the city. If there is any chance to pick up a mobile phone conversation with anyone in the group, it can be tracked until it leads to the target. 2 helicopters and 2 small planes are tracking the vehicle Brock and his 2 friends are in. Agents in disguise are being taken to the scene so that if possible they can begin to follow at a close distance. The agents will change the followers every few minutes so there is less of a chance that Brock will think he's being followed. If they can pull it off, Brock may just lead them right to Alvarez. If Alvarez and his crew have been staying at almost the best location they could have found. However, now that the police have surely ran the plates from the car, they have to leave. The place where they have been hiding for the past 6 days is almost perfect because there is no chance anyone could have seen them unless they themselves were seen. The house is on a hill sloping towards the back, but the back of the yard is raised to keep it level with the back of the house. There are large hedges over 25 feet tall all around the backyard, and on the other side of them is a 6-foot wide fence with no gaps in it. The deck and small pool are at ground level, so they can be enjoyed in privacy. Alvarez and his bunch arrived at night and in a van, which drove directly into the garage. No one got out until the door of the garage was closed, so therefore no one got a look at anyone. When anyone except the regular dwellers came or left, they did so in the same manner, so as to be unseen. Yes, as usual, Antonio has thought of everything, but the police are trying to stay one step ahead. Remember, they found the scanner at the house in Florida, so they're sure there will be one here as well. How will they do that, you may ask? 12:22 June 5th, 1992, Portland, Oregon, USA. This is Unit 5 to Unit 1, over. The officer in the surveillance truck said. This is Unit 1, go ahead, Clark answered. We have found a good position and are awaiting instructions, was the reply. Excellent. Call out the procedures when it's your turn, Clark said over the radio. Then he put down the handset and said to Joe and Hines, here we go. There are 10 FBI units for this operation, including the 3 radio trucks. Clark, Myers, Hines, and Portland Deputy Police Chief Roger Watts are in one unit running the show. The city police have dedicated 10 units of their own with others on alert. Meanwhile, the Oregon and Washington State Police are covering the edge of the city, the bridges, and the state lines. The hope is to find the hoodlums before trouble starts, and if possible, to take them down in an unpopulated area, or if possible, before they try to get away with something. There is no longer an interest in going after any bigger fish. It's time to get these animals off the streets. The plan is actually very simple, yet quite creative. 3 FBI units and 3 local units will buzz around and be seen by Alvarez and his gang. The catch is that they will be speaking over the radio in a way to make the bad guys think the authorities can't find or catch them. The whole time, Alvarez and his bunch will think the cops are lost and will just try to get away. Each time these dummy cars pass by one of the gang, they will ask for updates from the other units on the last reported sighting, all the while knowing exactly where they are. I sure hope this code works. If he thinks we're going in circles, he'll be easier to follow, Clark says. Yeah, Joe begins. I hope we don't need all the firepower we have. His voice changes noticeably as he pulls out the AR-15 submachine gun from the carry bag beside him on the floor. Our boys have these and MP5s. The locals have shotguns mostly, along with their 357s. They're the ones I worry about the most, Clark says with a tone you rarely hear from his voice. FK is thinking about all the could-bes, and it's not helping his ulcer. They are the easiest to pick out, usually the first to get there and the least prepared. If we run into a bunch armed like those in Florida, we're going to need the fucking Marines. This is Unit 2 to Unit 1, over. Go ahead, Unit 2. We are ready to begin scanning the area along with Units 3 and 4 plus Units A, B, and C from the City Police. Perfect, Unit 2. To all units, this is Clark. We will be doing check-ins every 10 minutes. Call in as your turn comes up and relay your location. Unit 2, roger. Unit 3, that's a go. City Unit A, check. City Unit B, roger. This is City Unit C. We hear you as well. Well, boys, Joe says to his colleagues in the car, now to see if they take the bait. Up next, Chapter 12, The Western Swing, from The Truth and the Circle Around It by Kage Scott.